Hi ladies, once again it's a great day and we connect with you on Satynmag.com and in our run-up of Power Women, Women Who Matter and Women to Watch. We are very pleased today to share our space with Ramaaya Salgado, who is the Country Focal Manager and Program Analyst for UN Women. As we know, UN Women has a huge role to play in the empowering of women across communities. So we will be talking to Ramaaya about her role and what she's been doing in this space and what inspires her and how she could be an inspiration to others.
Ramaaya Salgado, and it's, I've been working in the field of international development for the last 14 to 15 years. It's always been something I have been interested in because my mother worked in the UN for 37 years before she retired a few years back, and it's what I was exposed to as a child. When I was going to university, I chose my subjects based on, what would make me ready for this kind of a job. And I didn't join the UN immediately straight out of university. I worked in Sri Lankan non-governmental organizations, I worked in international organizations, all working in the field of child rights and women's rights, before I landed here at UN Women in 2014. And it really was a job that sparked a lot of interest in me, because it took a long time for me to understand that the freedoms I take for granted is not the same kind of freedoms that women in general are afforded to, not just in Sri Lanka but around the world as well. And I felt like having the experiences I had, that there was something I could contribute to. And UN Women's mandate is so beautiful in that ways, because it works towards the empowerment of women but also of all genders, and that really was something that sparked my interest. And so I'm really privileged to have been able to take that opportunity up, and I've been here for the last 8 years, and it's been a great journey since. I mean, the work UN Women has been doing in the country has evolved around certain thematics. So we worked on women's political participation, but not just political participation, but empowering them to make decisions in all spheres of life. We worked on the economic empowerment because, as you know, in Sri Lanka, despite having a high ratio of women who are educated, that does not translate in the labor force. And so we worked on that. We worked on women, peace and security. As Sri Lanka is a post-conflict country, the issues were plentiful, and that was certainly a space the UN Women felt they could contribute to. We worked on ending violence against women, which once again is such a huge issue in this country, but also in the region and globally. And then to some extent we've done, work on gender responsive budgeting, which of course comes under governance, and policy advisory work with our nodal ministry, the Ministry of Women and Child Affairs. But the work in itself and how it's changed my perspective of the issues has been that, when you're brought up in Colombo and you're educated in Colombo, your worldview is very limited in many ways, and you take for granted the privileges that have been afforded to you, also because of your upbringing and who your parents are, etc. But what UN Women has allowed me to do is to broaden that perspective. We've traveled across the country, worked in all 25 districts, had some really fantastic interactions with really courageous, resilient women, at the grassroots, who have endured a lot more than I could ever have imagined, and that gives you that perspective that you need to do programming that directly supports women in this country, but also not just them currently, but hopefully the young women and girls to come, right? And so that has been a wonderful experience in many ways, and that's that's one of the biggest experiences I take with me. It's not to say that I was unaware that what happens in Colombo is not the reality of what happens outside of the country, but there's nothing to replace first-hand experience, and I'm very grateful for that opportunity. About 2-3 years ago, we initiated a program called Multi-Party Dialogues, which I think to date is one of the most outstanding pieces of work that UN Women has done. And that brings together women from across political parties. We bring together some of the administrative officials, some civil society members, and local media, where possible, of course. And for us, that was just so eye-opening, because at the national level, all you see is the inability of parties to work across political ideology, etc. But we worked at the local government level because we were trying to support and strengthen women's leadership skills, straight after the 25% quota for women in local government was rolled out. And it really was a fantastic experience, because we saw the ability of people to work across political ideology, regions, ethnic identity, religious identity, and that really is something that gives you hope when you do work, because sometimes it's very easy to get bogged down by all the paperwork you have to do, but it's the field related experience that you gain that gives gives life to the kind of administrative work that you do in an office. Been with UN Women for 8 years, and the people I work with and come into contact with have been very inspirational in many ways. But if you're talking about inspiration or positive influence on your formative years and thereon, it's within my immediate family circle. So I had a very strong maternal grandmother, and I would say she would be the biggest influence in my life. Then of course there's my mother, but I feel like you can't talk about my mother without talking about my father, because in heavily patriarchal societies you hardly ever have a woman taking decisions and being at the forefront, and that really was what my mother was and is. It's not to say that my father isn't, it's just that they are a supportive act in many ways, because my mother and my father allowed us to do whatever we wanted, and not in wild abandonment kind of way, but they always told us, you live with the choices you make, so you're free to make your choices, but you live with those as well. So your mistakes are your mistakes. It's not to say that they won't help us, but they gave us the freedom to make. The one that hit me the most, I would say, is that we were, I think, somewhere in the east of the country, and we were doing what I had discussed earlier, the multi-party dialogues. And we had at the same table, sitting side by side, a former LTT cadre and a former Sri Lankan army officer, a female officer, sitting side by side, discussing the needs of their community and how they can commonly come together to resolve the issues for their constituents, because they were both elected officials. And for me, that was really, it was a seminal moment, because for me it was, if they can do it, why can't everyone else, right? So that I feel was like the biggest privilege to be part of as part of my work. It's also that the kind of work that inspires you to do a lot more. But certainly by far the biggest, it's a small thing, but by far the one that will stay with me for the years to come.